Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Ateneo de Manila University's School of Humanities, the Department of Communication, and the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings, and Exploding Galaxies, we welcome you to SARAP and PALAYOK, the Doreen G. Fernandez Legacy. I am your host, Glenn Sevilla Mas, an assistant professor and the Theater Arts Program Coordinator of this university, of course, of the Department of Fine Arts. Today is a special occasion as it marks the 91st birthday of Doreen G. Fernandez, teacher, writer, cultural historian, and scholar. For 30 years, since 1972, she taught here at the Ateneo de Manila and chaired the departments of Communication, English, and Interdisciplinary Studies. Her works are foundational in several fields of Philippine studies, including literature, theater, and food. A household name, eminent scholar, and critic, Doreen Fernandez is remembered by many for her kindness, curiosity, and warmth. I am happy to be here with you today in this theater named in her honor. Today, we are celebrating the republication of Doreen Fernandez's food books, SARAP and PALAYOK. The former co-authored with her dear friend and collaborator, Edelberto N. Alegre. Later, there will be a talk by renowned food historian Felice Sta on the Filipino Food Writer, and a short conversation with Micky Fenix and Neni Romana-Cruz on Doreen G. Fernandez's legacy. There will also be a special zarzuela performance and a standing cocktail reception after the event. To open the program, I am honored to introduce the Dean of the School of Humanities, Dr. Patricia Lambino, to say a few words.
Thank you, Glenn. Good afternoon to you all, friends, colleagues, relatives, students, and students of Doreen. It's customary during birthdays to bring gifts to the celebrant. But today, we will unwrap and enjoy the birthday celebrant's gifts to us all. I will just name two, her writing and her teaching. So first, our special guest, Ms. Felice Sta, has called Doreen the Dean of Philippine Food Columnists. It's not easy to be the dean of anything, much less of columnists, but Doreen held and continues to hold that distinction effortlessly and naturally by the sheer authority of her writing. Writing is authoritative when it's convincing, when it's backed by reliable sources, and this part we often miss, when it's well received. And Doreen's writing was always well researched, yet accessible. It was always elegant, yet casual and fun to read. And the works we are relaunching today, SARAP and PALAYOK, are two such exemplars of great writing and cultural research of her time. Gift number two. Many in the audience today were her students, fellow teachers, colleagues, friends. They have great stories about Doreen's classes. I was never a student of Doreen, so let me share instead a snippet from a classroom observation by a certain Bing from the English department in January of 1982. This is how they did classroom observation back then. Doreen skillfully initiates a lively discussion in her class. With her charming smile, which eases tension-gripped students during class recitation, she tickles her students' minds with one well-thought-out question and effortlessly facilitates an enriching discussion. She manages to gather a representative number of reactions to, impressions, and insights regarding vital points raised in class. And without the students knowing it, the class does all the work. Inquiring, talking, explaining, a healthy exercise to prepare them for writing compositions in the next hour. Without realizing it, students are challenged to facilitate among themselves a more in-depth discussion of ideas as Doreen constantly throws more and more questions to the class. The discussion of points raised in class is further clarified in a synthesis that she provides with much lucidity, humor, and wit. And then 2 more paragraphs of similar comments and the evaluator bingos. Also, Doreen has her way of catching students who failed to prepare for the day. Matter-of-factly, she will remark, "Oh, you didn't read the assignment?" And with her smile, she will continue, "Who can help her?" The negligent student will feel the impact of her negligence, but will still be assured that Doreen remains her friend. Okay. Let me be bold and say I think that this tradition of excellent writing and teaching still lives on in some form among the best of us here at Ateneo in the changed circumstances of our day. Still, I wonder if Doreen were alive today, what would she think of us? And what would she think of things like online teaching? Or the ubiquity of food delivery? Or Instagrammable food and restaurants? Like, what would she say about our learning crisis and what's happening to our reading and writing and AI? Sagad-sagad na natin lahat ng tanong. No? No doubt, she would demand of us who study these things the same nuance and balance in our thinking and writing. She would want depth in our reading and skill and commitment in our teaching. I hope that tonight's conversation really will give us greater insight into Doreen's legacy and help us write and teach with the same effortless grace that she had. Okay. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the evening.
So thank you very much, Dean Trish. To speak on the republication of SARAP and PALAYOK, I am honored to introduce Mara Coson, publisher of Exploding Galaxies.
Hi, I'm Mara, publisher of Exploding Galaxies. So we're a press focused on rediscovering the best out-of-print Philippine writing. So that we even had the wonderful and momentous opportunity to republish SARAP and PALAYOK is thanks to people here, the estates of Doreen G. Fernandez and of Edelberto and Alegre. So we have Maya Besa Rojas here. Please give her a warm round of applause. And on the side of Ed Alegre, we have his wife, Joycey Alegre. Another round of applause. I still pinch myself. It's been incredible to have the opportunity to do this. So that we're also able to celebrate this today, I really have to thank the Ateneo School of Humanities, the Department of Communication, Aliu, Robbie Reyes, our speakers and our performers, the people behind the Doreen Black Box, and to everyone else here today. So, as Glenn mentioned earlier, today is Doreen Fernandez's birthday. And so I felt that in this moment of republication, we really needed to honor her many decades of in Ateneo by bringing her back to home, her writing back to home base, to celebrate with people who knew her well, but also for students and fans who, like me, never got a chance to meet her. I never got a chance, unfortunately, to meet Doreen Fernandez, though like many readers, her writing somehow has the magic of making us feel personally acquainted. So Coconut Dreams, explorations into hometowns, the contributions of Sausawan. When you think about it, SARAP was published almost 40 years ago, PALAYOK 25. And yet people continue to search for these books, in search of her as well, to quote her, to be guided by her. I myself first heard about her from Clinton Palanca, a friend and colleague who, like Fernandez, was best known as a food writer, but who was much more than that. And he regarded her as a mentor. And at the time, I was so curious, like, who is Doreen Fernandez? So fast forward to now, it is also naturally to his memory that these books are dedicated. And after I told Maya that I was dedicating this project to Clinton, she surprised me with a foreword for an edition of SARAP some years ago that didn't push through. And so I want to quote him now, as he has said it better than I can. The essays that make up SARAP don't owe their importance to being the first of their kind. They are important because they transcend their moment and they are timeless, and this is what makes them classics. So while Doreen Fernandez made her mark in food, literature, theater, I also want to take a moment, especially being here in Ateneo today, to remember that she was a teacher. And since our new editions came out, we've received so many heartwarming stories from former students, former colleagues, revealing more and more the near endless reach of her impact. And so Clinton once asked Doreen Fernandez how she'd describe herself, and she told him, "I think I am basically a teacher. Basically, completely, thoroughly a teacher. The other things feed into it or are born of it." So thank you to all of you who have supported our republication. You're really why we do what we do.
Thank you very much, Mara. It is my pleasure to introduce Felice Santa Maria, who joins us today for her talk, Nayánayá, Celebrating the Filipino Writer. Felice Prudente Santa Maria is an internationally awarded nonfiction author, editor, cultural advocate, and pioneer in Philippine colonial food era history. Her numerous written works include The Governor General's Kitchen, Philippine Culinary Vignettes and Period Recipes, 1521 to 1935, and her latest, When Mangoes and Olives Met at the Philippine Table, the first book to document the written history of Philippine cuisine during the Spanish and American colonial eras. Copies of this book are for sale outside the Salvador Bernal lobby, so right outside. Throughout her career, Santa Maria wrote columns for the Manila Times, the Philippine Star, and the Philippine Daily Inquirer. She served as a commissioner on the Philippine National Commission for Culture and the Arts from 1992 to 1995, and the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines from 1992 to 2012. Currently, she is on the board of advisors at Ayala Museum and the vice president for internal affairs and co-founder of the Food Writers Association of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give her a warm applause.
Thank you all for coming, and I'd like you to say a word with me. Nayánayá. Can you repeat it? Nayánayá. Nayánayá. And I say this because Nayánayá means something so important, but the word is about to disappear. It was resurrected. It's a Cebuano word that's also used in Iloilo, and it means to host a guest and to be happy. To host a guest, and if you look at the 1628 handwritten document that first defines it, it says to host a guest, to care for a guest, to entertain the guest, to make the guest happy. And in the process, the host becomes nayanayaon. The host becomes happy. This is the closest native word to Philippine hospitality. I sincerely hope that the next generation will be able to make a case for perhaps incorporating it into the Philippine national language. So, Nayánayá, that's what we want to be the goal of today, to become happy, to become cheerful, by celebrating our hero for today, none other than Doreen Fernandez. She's working in a wonderful field, as are many of the food writers who are here tonight, because food can make people feel happy. Food can tell us what is our heart, what is our soul. And these are the areas of food writing today. I'm going through this real casually, okay? This is not an academic presentation, by the way. But take a look at that. You can make a career out of food writing today. All those possibilities, and there are quite a number that are not included as well. Because what we need to remember is that food writing, like food, it evolves continuously. And food writing is story. Each one of us has a story. We have many stories about the food we eat, about the food we cook, about the food that was inherited by our community. But there's also history. History is the story, but the story as it relates to all these many things happening around us, to the what we would call the polychronic events around us. What happens in economics, in politics, in nutrition, in philosophy, in religion? How does all of this fuse with the story of food? There is a history, there is a chronology, and I beg of you to please look into the chronology and not just the story. And then what else is there? There's story, there's history, and there's advocacy. Each time you make a choice of what you're going to eat and what you are not going to eat, you're actually advocating for more than you can imagine. We're moving into the early 20th century because this is what feeds directly into the food writing of today. During the Spanish period, there was no food writing as we know it today. There were instances in the magazines where some of the writers would do satire, the way that Rizal and Noli and Philly would satirize a character, ridicule a character, and through this satire, make a statement that this is good, this is bad, this is racial prejudice, this is just terrible thinking of a period. So we would have satire of the poor Chinese vendor, satire of the Filipino cook, satire of the house helper. There's one named Agapito Makapinggan, because he had this affinity with plates, with pinggan. He was breaking all the plates. But this is the kind of, quote, food writing during the Spanish period. But the Spanish who were writing did not stop with satire of the natives. They also made fun of the bagong salta. They made fun of the newly arrived Spaniards who couldn't make sense of the local terrain. So that was during the Spanish period. But during the American period, in 1900, what was going on was there were all these new food products that were coming in tax-free from the United States. And the Filipinos were lapping it up. They said, oh my gosh, we've got canned asparagus. We have raisins that we can afford. We've got all kinds of hams and sausages, Vienna sausages, all these things that we didn't have before. And they were well priced because they were imported tax-free. The United States needed markets for its food products. They suffered in World War I when they had not yet fought in the war because they lost their European clients. And when they finally fought at the end of World War I, they had to recover markets for their own agricultural products. So we became part of that market. And the star of the day was the food demonstrator. If you were a food demonstrator, you were always in the news. And there was an American food demonstrator. What her name escapes me, Senior Moment, it'll come back. But as a result, many graduates of home economics and graduates of food science wanted to be food demonstrators. And the Filipino companies that were importing all these food products took advantage of these Filipinos who could now demonstrate these sausages and this spaghetti and this macaroni and all these new products to Filipinos, and they could answer their questions in the native language. So always recipe-based. I put this here because the lady at the bottom, Mrs. Lichauco, she was known for having graduated from Le Cordon Bleu, which you have here now in Ateneo. And when she set up Luisa's on the top floor of a new building, and she had a river view, Pasig River view. That was in those days, if you had a Pasig River view, that was wonderful. The river was clean. It was for tourists. It was something that you wanted to see. And so up on the top, she had something like a little tea salon. And she made sure that it was not just going to serve the French delicacies that she had mastered. She insisted it had to serve Filipino food that included kakanin. And so her recipes for both French and Filipino food would be published in these newspapers and magazines, just like the recipes of Maria Rosa and Paz Muscuñana. So in the 30s, what we had, no food writers, we had the society editors, society writers that were carried over from the Spanish period. They would sometimes say so-and-so was the caterer for so-and-so's wedding, and they had 400 guests, and he fed 400, but he didn't tell us what he fed, okay? That was the problem with researching that period. Then the home economists and graduates of food science, so they pushed for things like the home institutions section. But always cooking, always recipe-based. Even that food section still in the 1940s, recipe-based. At that time, there were already 2 radio stations, by the way, in the 1930s. And radio had become something for food as well. You had to write a script. And the big thing for Renato, which is the company that started to import Marcapiña ham in the 1860s or 1880s, Renato bought radio time. And one of the big events was, oh, you've got to tune in because we've got a real Italian chef. And the real Italian chef is going to give you a real Italian recipe that you can cook at home. And you can buy the real Italian ingredients from us, from Renato. Then there was another instance. There was a movie star, and she was so famous at the time. And Renato said, oh, that famous movie star, she's going to tell us what her favorite recipe is. She's going to tell you how to cook it here on air. So we had that already, some advertising. But in the 1950s, look what happens. This is after the war already. And the Manila Chronicle, well, the Lopez family, was always trying to push for something, I guess you might call progressive in the country. And they pioneered in the food show. And Nora Daza had just come in. She'd studied in Cornell, and Nora Daza hosted the very first food television show. Again, it was recipe-based, the recipes of Nora Daza. And there was a club. Manila Chronicle knew what they were doing. They had a women's magazine, they had the newspaper, they had a radio station, they now had the television station, and they set up a club, a women's club that specialized in sharing recipes. They had a club at Port area. And all these women would attend the show, and sometimes their recipes would be featured. And they would have contests. And these women would vie for prizes, home appliances. So this is what we have in the 1950s, a major change. But still what was not happening, everything was still recipe-based. What was not happening was the talk about what is it like to enjoy a meal? What do you look for when you cook? What are the characteristics of fine food? There was no such thing. And then one day, Abe Cruz and an older Mariano Henson and P.C. Mauricio, these 3 gentlemen, they would come together, just like men today, just like girls today. We come together for a meal and we talk about a meal. And what Abe Cruz said was, this man is different. He's always talking about, if I'm going to cook paella, it has to have only this brand of chorizo. It can't be anything else. If I'm going to be making this dish, it has to be this brand of imported butter. It can't be anything else. And if I'm going to cook a duck, it has to be this kind of native duck that is caught only during the season because it has this fattiness, it has this texture that you can only get with this kind of duck. So Abe Cruz said, this is a type of personality that we need to write about. So he wrote about him, P.C. Mauricio wrote about him, Julia Abdaza also interviewed him. But that kind of writing stopped there. What we had, thankfully, was an introduction into a more regularity of that type of food writing because Manila Chronicle got Willie and Doreen Fernandez to do the very first restaurant review writing. And I remember I would ask Doreen, how come you never seem to criticize a restaurant? Haven't you had a bad meal? Oh yes, she said, I've had quite a number of bad meals, but I will not write anything bad about them. And she went on to explain why. And I said, so then what do? You've got to fill up all that space. And she says, well, that's where the talk about what makes a particular dish superb. What makes something not just masarap, but something malinamnam. That's where it comes in. Or she will say, I read something about a little bit of Philippine history about a dish, so I put it in there. Sometimes I get something from, the anthropologists and what food means in the anthropological discourse, and I put it in. So this column was now starting to shape a future of food writing. Now, just a little bit older, about 4 years older than Doreen, and writing also in the Manila Chronicle, was Hilda Fernando. She was kind of like my ninang in writing. And Hilda's was kind of like lifestyle writing, but hers, she was an award-winning short story writer. And in those days, if you were a short story writer, you were a celebrity. The magazines published short stories. There were competitions like the Palanca for short stories, and she was forever winning in the Palanca for short stories. But she brought her style of casual writing, familiar short story writing, she brought that into her column, and once in a while, she would talk about food. But she was not a food writer. She endeared herself to me when there was already a lot of political disturbance. And her column was about, somebody wrote in and said, Hilda, I don't know what to do. My son, my daughter, they want to join the activists. They want to go join the rally. Hilda, what am I going to do? Her answer was endearing. Buy them the best rubber shoes you can find. That's when I knew I had found my writer. I had found my icon. I have to talk more about Hilda. Because 1972, by the way, all the newspapers, all those newspapers they were writing for, the Manila Chronicle, ABS, CBN, all of that, everything had to fold up, and you had to apply for new licenses. And at that time, Egi Apostol set up Woman's Home Companion, and Doreen and Hilda were constants. I was a newbie. I was only in my early 20s, and they took me under their wing. And Hilda was the associate editor for Filipino Heritage. Her co-associate editor was to become our national artist in history writing, Charlie Quirino. So Hilda brought her short story writing technique, her lifestyle column technique into history. And she started writing about the food for the magazine. And I wasn't realizing I was being shoehorned into writing about historical matters, transportation, economics, changes in food, things like that. I was already writing for them. So we're talking the early 70s, mid 70s. And then this happens. In 1972, you all know we had martial law. And Marcos needed an event to legitimize his government. And we were having such terrible economic difficulties. He needed something that, again, would help us boost our economy. And he was very fortunate. The International Monetary Fund decided that they would have their conference in Manila. Suddenly, we had new hotels. We had all kinds of new products coming in. Anyway, the banks that were participating, the local banks that were participating, needed to have giveaways to the delegates. And Bancom was one of the biggest banks at the time. And Bancom decided, they were persuaded by Hilda, they were going to give a book about Philippine cuisine. How apolitical can you get? And if you look at the writers, you will see that for the first time, Hilda Fernando, Doreen Fernandez, and myself shared bylines. So that's how old we are. Now, during this period, I'd like to point out there were things happening outside of the Philippines. Food was not a legitimate topic for the academe. Food was just, something you ate, something you discussed to have fun about, nothing serious. It was like, what is masarap? How does it become malinamnam? How could that possibly have any academic merit? But things were changing. There were anthropologists who were looking into food as social structure. They were looking into food as symbolism. They were looking into the structure of words of food. There were people who were saying, but the science and the sociology have to go together. You cannot divide. See, this is new thinking. For you, it's nothing. But in those days, this was new. There was no American food studies program until around 1994. I think that was NYU. So 1994. Okay, take a look at that. The Oxford Food Symposium began with science and food. And then science and food plus travel writing with serious history. With history and travel writing reflective of society. So again, it's serious, but it still was not an academic topic. So Oxford Food Symposium was sort of handling that need for the moment. In the United States, is it there? Okay. The United States, what was happening, it was out of anthropology and folklore. Food has always been part of anthropology. You study a society, you study its food. But the viewpoints and the meanings of the food were changing. So now in the US, we were having more out of the folklore. And their topics were not like the ones in the Oxford Food Symposium. In the United States, it was more political. It was food of the Black community, foods of the Native Americans, foods of immigrants, and all the political undertones that would feed into that kind of a discussion. Anthropology. And then McDonald's tries to build a branch next to the Spanish Steps in Rome. And suddenly, Mamma mia, no, they cannot do that. We will not allow them. And we have what? The start of the slow food movement. And we have the University of Bra concept shaping. So you see how food, it's all these things coming together. It's really polychronic. We have to look at things from all points of view. You get a food manifesto. Imagine that. That's a big thing. We don't want our food to be ruined by fast food. We don't want our food heritage to disappear. That did not exist earlier. And now we're all up in arms if anything dares to criticize our Filipino food, our heritage. Aren't we thankful? And it was people like Doreen. They were ahead of us. They were the pioneers. This is their era. See, it's a transformative era. And she was there. So then we have Ark of Taste. We have UNESCO. UNESCO didn't have food when I was a commissioner. And we kept hoping that it would have more food in it, which it does. So here we go. Suddenly, cultural heritage, food. Societal identity, food. Studying common life through food. Food systems. Industrial agriculture. Doreen helped us get to there. Here, she was our first representative. She had Ambeth Ocampo, his thesis on regular food, everyday food versus fiesta food. She had him present and get it published in Oxford. Pia Castillo followed with vinegars. I don't think we've had any representative since. And by the 1990s, the word food writer is popularized in the United States. And then we follow. And we have our two heroes for today, food writers, Ed and Doreen. Doreen was kind enough to shoehorn me further and force me to really look into food history. She had Nancy Reyes looking into street food at the time, because Nancy's the smart kid. I'm the one who stays in the archives and doesn't talk to anybody. So the two of us were perfect for our roles for Doreen. And then she and Ed launched LASA. This is the first food as culture conference in the country. Were it not for Doreen, Philippine food would not be considered part of the world's food. Because she had met Alan Davidson in the Oxford Food Symposium. When he came out with food, the Philippines got included. This is an overlooked work of Doreen. Please look at it carefully. We should really celebrate her for this. You're probably wondering, what does this have to do here? Well, Doreen, I hope I'm not over time, Doreen was one of those women you couldn't say no to. And Doreen called some of her friends up, as did a man named Phil Huntrial. I don't know if CJ is here, because CJ also writes about food. And Phil was a gourmand. He had set up the International Wine and Food Society in the Philippines. The problem was the men did not seem to want to have women members. They would invite their wives or their girlfriends, but they would never make them members. And every time a woman would suggest that maybe she wanted to join, suddenly everybody was just quiet. So Phil and Doreen decided that maybe we should have an all-women's group here, because in Australia, there was an all-women's group. So people like Micky Fenix, who will be joining us on stage later, and myself couldn't say no. Next thing we knew, we were setting this up, and we were all ready to elect Doreen as our chairman and Doreen as our president. Before anybody could say anything, I was already like that. She says, I would like to speak, and I want Felice to be the president and chair. And I go, oh no. I said, Doreen, I don't talk to people. You know, I stay home. I'm not friendly. You know? But anyway, you can't say no to a woman like Doreen. Neither could Micky, right? Next thing we knew, we were setting this up. The date of Doreen, by the way, for that night was Ambeth. So you can ask him what she said then. And why do I bring that up? While Doreen was a member of the Manila Ladies branch of the International Wine and Food Society, she kept saying that, there's another gap. We should have a contest for food writing. Maybe that will help develop our food writing. And we had several food writers who were members of the branch. And so they would meet. I wasn't a food writer. I wasn't with their meetings. Micky, you guys left me out. I felt so bad. Only the food writers would meet with Doreen about food writing. I was relegated to something else. So it started in 2003, thanks to the lady in black, the fourth from the left. That is Chef Myrna Segismundo, who happened to chair the Chefs on Parade for 2003. At that time, we had lost Doreen. We were all very sad about it. And Myrna said, no, we must continue her legacy. We must have the contest. And so it started in 2003. And then it was difficult for the Wine and Food Society, who didn't have a lot of food writer members anymore, to continue managing the contest. So Micky, Myrna, the lady in red, some of you might be familiar with the books of Studio 5, which is a very highly awarded international atelier. So she, Micky, Myrna, and myself formed Food Writers Association of the Philippines. And we're on our 22nd DGF Food Writing Award. Doesn't that call for applause? Other developments that I'm sure Doreen was hoping for was we would finally have some kind of a culinary heritage association. So we have that, and now every April we have Food Month. The gap was there was no history. Remember, there is story, there is history, there is advocacy. There was no history. So there are those and a whole bunch of papers that you might want to read. I assure you they're boring, but they're very good. Finally, we have this. This would not have been possible without everything you saw before that, before this slide. If Doreen hadn't primed us, if Doreen hadn't pointed out the gaps, if Doreen hadn't tried to bring food writers together on behalf of food, if Doreen hadn't made our restaurants important, if she hadn't brought academe and popular writing together, this would have been still a dream. And now, where are we? I saw Clara Lapus walk in. She is president of the president of the Mamacita Foundation that helped this group. And Halo Halo Ecologies, and you should all read it. It is a statement for 2025. It's not about food as heritage and romanticizing. Yes, the romance is there, but the food is poisonous. The romance is there, but we're going to get sick from eating our heritage food if we don't do something about the ingredients. Yes, the heritage food is there, but the farmers are starving. That's that book. So we have now almost come full circle. And heritage Food writing is helping us remember we must make choices. We have to look for clean food, healthy food. Mustn't allow people to starve. Support anti-hunger programs. Support sustainable green agriculture. Because it is mission, message, and integrity that nourish food writers. You must have integrity. That's why Doreen would never write anything bad about a bad meal. She'd never say a bad meal was good, but she would never say it was bad. She'd find something good to say. She found kindness. We need more kindness today. And if I can end us, where are we? Hi, Ed. Oh, one of these days I will do this right. Bear with me. My punchline. Because whatever you write, whether it's about food or not, whether you are legacy writers like Micky and myself and Doreen, who use the old-fashioned mass media, or the contemporary writers, I also use online. Okay, we straddle. But writing enlightens, it encourages, and it shapes change. I'm looking at all of you. We need change, we know that. But let's work for the change we know, the change that is just, kind, good, and hopefully useful for the future. So enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
So thank you very much, Ma'am Felice, for your very insightful, very engaging talk about Ma'am Doreen and food writing in the Philippines. And now, ladies and gentlemen, joining Ma'am Felice is in our next panel discussion are two of today's respected food writers and educators in the country. Micky Fenix and Neni Santa Romana-Cruz. Please allow me the honor to briefly introduce them. Micaela Micky Fenix Macabenta is a writer and editor whose main interest lies in food and Philippine cuisine. For 15 years, she wrote a column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer called Country Cooking. Her book, Country Cooking, Philippine Regional Cuisines, won the National Book Award Best Food Book in 2014. She has written and collaborated on numerous food books and is editor of over 10, including The Ultimate Adobo Book, first and second edition by Claude Tayag, and Flavors of Iloilo by Rafael Hardelesa Jr., which won the National Book Award in 2023. She has lectured on Philippine cuisine around the country and in China, England, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. Currently, she is president of the Food Writers Association of the Philippines and chair for 20 years of the Doreen Fernandez Food Writing Award. Neni Santa Romana-Cruz is founding director of the Where the Right Things Are Writing Center and was former chair of the National Book Development Board. She is a published author of 18 books to date and has been anthologized in over 30 books. A freelance journalist, book reviewer, and editor, she was the Learning Curve columnist for the op-ed section of the Philippine Daily Inquirer on education, literacy, books, and reading, her special areas of interest. Joined by Felice Santa Maria, these three writers, researchers, and educators will continue enriching our conversation on food writing and the legacy of Doreen G. Fernandez. Let us give them all a warm welcome as they join me on stage for this panel discussion. And now I am honored to partake as moderator of this discussion. So, hello, ma'am. Full disclosure, I started teaching in Ateneo in 2006. And by then, like Mara, it is very unfortunate that because of that, I never got to meet Ma'am Doreen. But I've heard so much about her from the other theater giants in this university, Sir Badong Bernal, Sir Ricky Abad, etc. But this is a wonderful opportunity for myself and for the audience members also to get to know Ma'am Doreen straight from her cousin and her friends. And so, yes, any fond memories that you can share with us? Si Ma'am here, Ma'am Neni, I heard earlier that she used to take the same ride to Ateneo with Ma'am Doreen. So how was that like, ma'am?
Doreen was a first cousin. Our mothers were sisters. And she was my next door neighbor. We would go to Ateneo. She was doing her PhD. Maybe I was doing my MA. But of course, she was the better student. We were in Chaucer class together, and I dropped out because I couldn't figure the old English, and Doreen was so good at it. So I had such a complex. But I did get my MA inspired by Doreen. So I don't have food memories of Doreen, but long ago, when there was a Manila Hilton, that was such a big hotel, and we were newly married and so poor, but she and Willie would take us out, and she introduced me to this wonderful salad, Caesar salad. It was unknown in Manila then. And then when I was pregnant, she'd take me to Kimpura, which was newly open, expensive. I couldn't afford it. And she introduced me to shabu shabu and what's the other thing? Tempura, maybe.
What year was that?
Well, I just got married, so maybe in 71 or 72, long ago. But Doreen was such a confidant. She would hold my hand when I cried over my engagement ring. She was my ninang and neighbor, so easy to confide in her. And she would also hold my hand through all the losses in the family, the murder of a sister. She was really such a shoulder to cry on. But you know, we paid such tribute to Doreen, but she was happy as a teacher. That's what she wanted to be remembered for. And I'm so happy this is in Ateneo, an institution she loves so much. Many of her food trips were with her students and with the Ateneo Jesuits. Also, a student said that when McDonald's opened, their activity was she had ordered the driver to buy 24 Macs, 24 of everything, and they ate and critiqued it. But her influence on me is that she taught me to eat the fish head and discover the 13 flavors. And also, her students, she would always be proud of them. Even Ambeth, who was failing, she bailed him out because Ambeth said he had poor grammar, but she could see the potential in him, and she really took care of him. So look at him now. And another one she was proud of was Clinton Palanca and Rui de Vera, the poet and the editor for books and arts for the Inquirer. What about your memories?
You know, what comes to mind initially isn't a memory of food. I was in Angono. I wanted to see the salubong again. And so early one year, I had all the people in my home. I said, come on, we're going to go to Angono. And I was still driving, and I had a little van, and I got there. And we saw the stage, and there was Lucio San Pedro. We were on waving terms, And then across on the other side, there was Doreen. And she had her whole class there. She was teaching them because theater, right? So theater. So we had one of these, hi, sort of things. And so I would see Doreen in places like that, where I didn't expect to see her. Once in a while, we would see each other in restaurants, and I would go, is she going to critique this restaurant? But I think one of the most, Doreen endeared herself. I've used endearing several times tonight, but Doreen had a way of endearing herself. When we had that LASA conference, I received a very beautiful note from her. I think it's with Aliu. She had heard that in a subsequent conference, an international Philippine Studies conference that Mila Guerrero had chaired, there was an attempt at a food panel. So this is like 1989, 1990. First attempt at a food panel in an academic setting. It was just Ambeth and myself. There were no others. And she had to force us. So Ambeth said, okay, I will present again my everyday, Pampangan food, everyday food, and fiesta food. And I presented, that's where I learned the term. What is it now? It's called preliminary findings. She said, call it preliminary findings. So it was preliminary findings on the influence of religion on Philippine food. And that's it. Thanks to Doreen. Preliminary findings. Micky, what about you?
Well, I think the first time I met her was during the launch of SARAP. And then, so I stood in front of them and said, what's your name? I said, Micky. Then she said, you're Micky Fenix? I said, yes. And then she said, oh my God. And then she wrote down on the book, I'm a fan. That really startled me because I think I've written about 3 stories, but mainly the stories were about the people rather than the food. Like the one on Lukban, one of my friends said that the grandmother would cook for Quezon when he came to play a headdress with the husband. And I said, what is a headdress? And then he said, chess. Ah, okay. And then she said she liked the way it's done that way, not really concentrating on the food. Because what was the food that was served was Lukban food. And so I just enumerated what Lukban food was, et cetera, But the mere fact of interaction, of people eating, and that really struck me as, okay, while the food is important, and so are the people who eat. And throughout my writings, I always do that. There will be food, and yet there will also be stories about people. And whenever we do the Doreen Fernandez Food Writing Award, this is what we look for, actually. Again, while the food is important, so are the people. And later on, when SARAP was launched in Baguio, she invited me to go with them. And we were a whole busload of people who were going there, writers, Ege Apostol, some other food writers. They were not known as food writers at that time, just writers. And so we would all go stop in Bulacan to eat, stop in Tarlac to eat, stop in, La Union to eat, and then until we went to Baguio. But the important thing to remember is that Baguio had just suffered from this great earthquake, And of course, my husband was saying, "Are you sure you want to go?" I said, "Of course," And when we were there, our hotel was really funny because you had to be careful walking on the corridor because some of the floors were down and up, I don't know why I wasn't afraid. I think it was the adventure of it. And then eating again, going back. We stopped provinces. And that gave me an idea that local food, is really more interesting than all this French and Spanish. That was the start of it.
Okay, so thank you very much, ma'am. We'll give the opportunity to the audience later to ask them questions, but in the meantime, any other stories about food? I am from Iloilo, and I read somewhere that she wrote her dissertation on Iloilo cuisine. Did she like bok choy? Did she write about the pancit molo? Did she, or any other memories about her favorite food?
No, she wrote about the hometown food, and she explained why this was what the Ilonggos wanted to eat, that sort of thing. So you have to think of writing about the local cuisine in those terms, something like that. So that's what I learned from her. And but she was such a good writer. I don't think I can follow that kind of writing because she was really very good. When you read it, you kind of think, "Oh my God, I don't think I can do this," even if you've written for 20 years already, But it is an example for you to follow.
Yes, and I'll most certainly look forward to going outside and grabbing copies of the republished books, SARAP and PALAYOK, which we should all do later. Hi, Mara. Promoting the book. So yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I must not forget two important things. Her home, her lovely home, where Maya lives now, was such a refuge for struggling writers. Her guest room was always there if you needed to write. I did my thesis there. So good meal, good ambience. It was done. But it was not only people like me. She also allowed, how do I call it, dissidents to stay there. So that when she died, they said Sierra Madre was mourning, and I feared. And recently, somebody from that era called me and said, "I want to visit that house." I said, "I'm sorry. It's no longer within my authority to go in. Somebody lives there now." So what good memories we have of that house with a swimming pool. Is the pool still there? Okay. Now, another thing, our family loved Doreen. She was one of our older cousins. But you know what she gifted us for about 10 years? Her gift of words. She initiated a family newsletter where each branch had to contribute. she made our octogenarian aunts write. So I still have all the copies. And Nick Johnson commented on it, and I said, I'm really embarrassed that we have that newsletter. But he said, but Neni, it's social history. It's so important. So Doreen continued that for over a decade. She made me take over. I only did it twice. Sorry, Doreen, but I tried. And she was typing it herself, having it printed. So Doreen, technology has changed. We are now vibering and emailing.
That's most wonderful. Anything else that you wish to share with us, ma'am, also? Yeah. And I think it is very fortunate that we're doing this discussion right in the very theater that is named after her, the Doreen Theater. And I'm pretty sure up there, the names I mentioned earlier, Dr. Ricardo Abad, Sir Salvador Bernal, they're doing a wonderful, I'm sure they're up there watching over us and having a jolly good time the way we are having a jolly good time down here also. So,
What the audience wants to know.
okay, so now we get to, I'd like to open the panel for questions from the members of the audience. Is there anyone, I guess we can accommodate 4, they said earlier. So anybody with a question, just please feel free to approach the microphone here in front.
Tita Felice, I just wanted, because you kind of emphasized how Doreen did not write anything negative about restaurants in her critiques, no? Do you think it's something that, it's like part of the context over time when people put up restaurants in a sort of an earnest way, an honest way, because they really wanted to serve good food, compared to, like current times when restaurants are not, they're more like concepts, how people talk about, oh, we have this new concept, ganyan, ganyan. So I kind of feel there's a lot of parang, it's all just talk, smoke and mirrors, dishonesty, no, with many of these things that need to be pointed out, like, di ba, parang, wait a minute, why is this restaurant purporting to serve this when actually they're not serving, it's something honest? So baka, kasi nga, why, maybe food writers now have that duty to point out this restaurant is dishonest.
That's a very good point, Ray. I remember Tatler. Tatler, before it became the big Tatler magazine here, for 2 years, they tried to come out with a Tatler guide. And some of us who tasted for Tatler, you have a score sheet. And some of the ones I was assigned were really bad. Some were excellent, but some were really so bad. And I would go to the bathrooms to check if the bathrooms were clean. I would look at the kitchen, where I wasn't supposed to go, but I could tell, by looking into the window if it was a clean kitchen or not. And if the people were happy, you can tell if the wait staff is happy or not. So I would just score it badly, and they wouldn't figure in the book. But then one time I was called, and I said, these people, they really expect to be in there. Can't you, try to be kind? And I thought about it, and I said, well, Doreen said, it could be that the cook was just having a bad day. She had this sense of humanity also. And I think maybe, Ray, maybe you're correct, because some of these restaurants were like a family restaurant, and she knew the owner, and they were really just trying to have this restaurant. So times have changed. But that's it. She would never, if it was bad, you knew it was bad because she didn't say anything really good about it. Really, read in between the lines. If it's 3/4 of the column is nothing to do about the restaurant, it's about one dish or some history that she just discovered that has nothing to do with that restaurant, don't go.
We food writers do that all the time. What do you write about if you didn't like the food? Oh, the lights were so many. You know? But I asked Doreen once, and I said, "You don't write anything negative." And then she said, "You know, it's a business. You can't let these people fail because of you." That's what she said, and I learned that, and that's why I don't like doing restaurant reviews. Also, I really don't.
Yes, I also have a friend in theater who does that. We would watch shows together, and after the the curtain call, the actors would ask, "Oh, kapatid, kumusta?" And he would say, the costumes were wonderful. The yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
You know, this reminds me, I was at a play, and Nick Joaquin was in attendance. And so during the intermission, Nick and I found ourselves together, just the two of us chatting. And I had met him through Eggy Apostol. So way back in the 70s. And Eggy hosted a dinner at her house, and she told me that she was going to sit Nick next to me, and that I should keep pouring beer for him, making sure that he had a bottle of beer, because that's the only way one could make him feel comfortable, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was always, "Nick, you want another beer? Nick, you want another beer?" And I was thinking, my gosh, this guy's going to think of me as the beer girl. But anyway, over time, Nick and I found our bylines together in several books. I was extremely embarrassed because Nick Joaquin is Nick Joaquin. But I bring this up, I'm plugging Ateneo Press, because the book that's coming out next month, Where Are You? It better come out next month, by Ateneo Press, is a food book. It is, in effect, the partner book to Mangoes and Olives. So if you buy Mangoes and Olives, I suggest you buy What Recipes Don't Tell. That is going to be published by Ateneo Press in honor of Nick Joaquin. I made a promise to Nick, and by the time I was able to fulfill that promise, Nick was no longer with us. So Ateneo is helping me fulfill the promise that I made while the two of us were in the middle of an intermission, and both of us looked at each other and said, "Well, what do you think of the show?" And we decided it was better to just talk about something else.
So thank you very much, ma'am. Do we have other questions from? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm AJ. I'm 22, and I recently graduated from Ateneo. I came from IS department. I studied food and literature. So I come from a generation where it's normalized. I studied food with Doc Zayasuto. I studied food studies in Japan. And I just want to say, because I feel like it's become easier now to savor the world, because I feel like global communications, it's become easier to check the recipes of what's happening in the States. And now here in the Philippines, we have, end of the month, I think we have the Michelin Guide coming out. So is there anything that you miss from before, how the F&B scene and I guess the Philippines was like? Would you care to share anecdotes? Because I feel like I'm 22 and I feel like reading. I first encountered Doreen Fernandez my freshman year at Ateneo. It was a required reading, and ever since I became so interested in food studies. But I feel like whenever I read a book or an essay by Doreen, I feel like it's a very vibrant Manila or Philippines that I don't have access to anymore. So I'd like to hear maybe what are the things you miss about F&B in the Philippines? Thank you.
What do we miss? I've been writing about food for 20, 30 years. And I stopped because I retired. Okay. What do I miss? I miss the fact that I can go and write about street food. I can go and write about higher end food, supposedly. But what I am more interested in are the people who do the cooking. I've met very good chefs, also very bad chefs. And I wanted to convey to them, to the reader, what this chef said and how it translates to his food, or what this cook has done and how, the ideas go into the food. That's what I miss actually now, because now I have to do the cooking.
Micky will interview you.
It's very difficult. I mean, I now understand how difficult it is to be a cook.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Morales from Le Cordon Bleu Ateneo. If Ma'am Doreen is still with us today in Ateneo, what do you think, knowing her so well, what do you think will she be talking to me or to us in Le Cordon Bleu in terms of activities, projects, events? In short, I'm picking her brains, and please feel free to put in your inputs also. It's a French school, of course, but we have, Le Cordon Bleu is going international now. It does not have to be just French that we teach, all right? So I would like to, knowing her, what would be the activities, advices, projects that you would tell me, let's do this?
I want to tell you something that I read that she wrote, and then I put it in the last book that we had. She said, and I said to myself, wow, for the first time, Doreen was wrong. Okay, what did she write? She wrote and said, in the years to come, nobody will write about Filipino food. That's what she said. It won't appear in the magazines or, on television. And I was wondering why. Maybe she felt despondent already because it wasn't really catching on at that time. And I want to tell her, "Bet you're wrong." Something like that. As to your question, I think she would help you. The French, they wrote about, they documented their food. We have started it, but not really that much, because I think as a people, we are unwieldy. Like for instance, if you tell me, my adobo is good, naku patay. Really. That's what got the Department of Trade and Industry into trouble by saying that they wanted to, standardize Filipino. Are you kidding? You can't. They're all very different, and all of them are they swear they have the best food. Okay? My Ilocano father would say he has the best food, for instance, or my mother, who's from Bataan, will say she has it. Okay? They can't agree. And I think up to now, it's the same thing. But that's what I like about our food. Compared it with Thailand. Are there any Thai people here? Everybody's saying, wow, Thai food is so good. But for me, they're all the same. I mean, the same. If you ask for tom yum here, it's a tom yum there. It's the same tom yum here, It was because they decided they're going to standardize. Okay? So I said, it can't do that to the Filipino, but at the same time, it's not good. You have to make for the differences, and usually the differences are that makes it so interesting, always. Very interesting.
I'd like to address it to the food writers and the two ladies beside me. It's often been said that Filipino food has a hard time getting on the world stage because when we serve it, it's not dish by dish. It's all on the table, and then maybe the appearance, I don't know. But I've heard it so often. So, what do you think?
Well, I think Doreen would be happy that times, in a way, have changed. Because we have the traditional family style that can confound some diners. But on the other hand, we have chefs that have been competing with their beautiful plating, and they serve, we have menus that are family style, and we have menus that are course by course. We have menus that are beautifully styled. You don't want to eat them. You know, when it's presented, you don't just take a photo, right? Nowadays, you take a photo. But I mean, you can really dine aesthetically. It's happening. And we see it even in provinces, you know, where there are beach resorts, where all this training, I think, with schools has helped expand the variety of Filipino food. So we can have the adobo made at home, then that same adobo translates into family-style restaurant, then that same adobo translates into some chef who wants to turn it into a beautiful first course or second course. So it's changing. And we need to now be more aware that there is this variety. And the taste is still good. We still have food that tastes good. It doesn't just look good. I remember us talking to another culinary heroine of mine, to Glenda Barreto. And Glenda was saying, oh, Felice, we have to be careful. We're at this in-between stage where everybody's so concerned about how it looks. She said, they're forgetting the taste first, how it tastes, and then how it looks. I was telling her, you know, Glenda, it's part of the learning. I think at some point, we're going to find that beautiful meeting point where we've moved ourselves one genre, because there are many genres in cuisine. And there's going to be a genre that tastes magnificent and that looks just so beautiful. And I think we're closing in on that without losing the home cooking, the unstyled home cooking, the honesty of that, the street food. So we're not losing that, we're gaining something. That's my take on it.
Actually, you know, sometimes it's not only, you know, the regional differences, but also generational differences. We were talking to Amboy's chefs who came over here, and then they were introducing the food of their grandmothers, but it was not their grandmother's food. So one of them said, what do you think when my grandma says, your barbecue is not like that, it's not like ours, you know. But what he does is he gets his experience and puts it in also, which is not the experience of the grandmother, obviously, you know. And then he asked me, what should I do? Should I continue my grandmother's barbecue or should I continue my barbecue? I said, continue your barbecue. No, it really should be what you know and what you like. You know your grandmother's barbecue, but this is how I do it. And it's experience, American experience, the boys. Okay?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any reactions from the members of the audience?
Hi, thank you so much. This was really a treat. I did not expect to hear such wonderful stories. I'm the president of OCAD University in Toronto, and in Canada, Filipino food is at the top of its game. So so don't fear. Really, everyone is killing it there, and we now have all of the genres of Filipino food being enjoyed by Canadians all over the place. So that's good.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a most wonderful, opportune time to move on to the next. Unless there's one last question. Yes, please, one last question for the panelists, please.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat sa ating mga nagsalita na alay para sa kabutihang loob at kagandahan ng pinamana ni Doreen Fernandez. I am Joyce Alegre, the widow of Ed Alegre. They were beshies. So I will share some personal note and some professional note. First, the professional note, because I was a student of Ed Alegre in literature and science and Japanese literature. At the time, they were writing writers and their milieu. And Ed introduced us to Doreen Fernandez, who, with all her stature, was so humble to sit in our class. So she struck me as the lady with white hair, a big lady, and she was in white. She appeared like an angel. Eventually, I would really say she is our earth angel. And next time I would see her would be during their field visit in Tacloban. I have graduated at that time, and Ed looked for me. Eventually, he would court me. And Doreen interacted with me too, and I was so inspired because she encouraged me to do research. I have not done sufficient cultural research at that time. I was into the performing arts. And the first question she asked me is, so Joyce, your parents are from Capiz, and you grew up in Tacloban. What is your culture? I could not answer. So it was a question that haunted me until I matured in my teaching in UP Tacloban. And when I found out the answer, well, I am by blood Ilongga, Hiligaynon like her, but culturally I am a Waray. And so fast forward, because of her inspiration, actually she edited my thesis. She and Ed edited my thesis in Philippine politics as performance. She did the cultural editing, Ed did the style editing, and my advisor in New York University said, no need to edit, Joyce. I was so blessed and privileged by the great editors of their time and my time. So she inspired me that I proceeded to do performance arts research and eventually also food research. I read her writings, I studied her style, and that would also help me other than my own understanding of my late husband's work. It helped me to draw a paper, to write a keynote paper on an international food conference in Cebu, and the title is The Sensuousness of Waray Food. Wow. And our guest of honor, when we first launched the Saro-Saro Kita, the first recipe of Waray food, which I edited, was Miss Micky Fenix, whose husband, Yen Makabenta, is a Waray. And Micky, I came to know because of Doreen, when Doreen invited me and Ed to Angono, so I could relate with the Angono story. I was also there in one of those visits. Now, fast forward to the personal note. A personal note. Doreen helped Ed court me. She would shop for pasta in Santi's Deli and wrote the recipe fettuccine del amore, which Ed tried to cook and read the recipe for about 40 minutes but couldn't cook. So I said, see Doreen's recipe. And I said, ginigisa pala. So they brought so many tomatoes and basil from Nick Perla's gardens, this really aromatic, fragrant basil for the first time. Other than our local sweet basil for the first time, I would have this bouquet of basil from Quezon City and interpreted Doreen's recipe, and it was successful. And the other food experience with Doreen was celebrating Ed's birthday. She is a loving friend, and she is so creative. She goes out of her way to prepare the best for her friends and for her family. And I was already part of her extended friendship and extended family in Tacloban. She brought my future mother-in-law, took her from the Dapitan. Those are photographs in our old apartment in Dapitan Street, which Ed demolished and brought the wood and glass to Tacloban. Yeah, so those are photographs in my mother-in-law's apartment. And these are special occasions. This one must have been taken on my mother-in-law's birthday, where Doreen would always be present. Okay, so fast forward to that. On Ed's birthday, she brought what she could, cheese, and a paellera. So she cooked paella and callos, and we were laughing in my father's and mother's kitchen. I will never forget how loud she laughed like a quintessential Visayan. She felt at home in our modest bungalow, my ancestral home in Tacloban City. And it was memorable because what many may not have known, Doreen's dissertation was the Iloilo Zarzuela. She wrote a composo. Maya? Yes. Your tita wrote a composo. It's a long verse in Hiligaynon, dedicated to Ed, and assigned to each one of us present, including my father, to sing a verse, one stanza each. And I still have a copy of that. It's a precious, precious composo, the traditional Iloilo Hiligaynon verse song. So all of us were so happy singing and dancing. She also waltzed in our living room. So our house that survived Yolanda has memories of Doreen's presence. Thank you very much for this sharing moment.
Yes, thank you very much. Damo, gid nga salamat sa imo, Mami. And I guess it's a wonderful time to end this discussion. You can approach them maybe outside later for more stories about Ma'am Doreen. And again, ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for these three most wonderful ladies. So salamat gid. Again, Felice Santa Maria, Micky Fenix, and Neni Santa Romana-Cruz. So thank you, good ma'am. Thank you very much. So thank you for the insightful discussion. And that wraps up our Q&A and the panel discussion. My warmest thanks again to our wonderful panelists. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you all to join us in a special segment which honors Doreen G. Fernandez's roots in theater. A zarzuela performance by Mr. Sulaiman Hamisolamin and Miss Hara K. Castillo. The zarzuela draws from Spanish roots. It is a lyrical theater drama alternating between song and speech. It's worth noting that Doreen Fernandez researched, as mentioned earlier, on the Iloilo zarzuela for her PhD dissertation in 1976. I quote this next passage from Fernandez's 1993 article from the Journal of Philippine Studies, Zarzuela to Zarzuela, Indigenization to Transformation. The zarzuela, theater born of Spanish parenthood but grown Filipino, mirrored a culture and its consciousness, and in turn created a culture and a consciousness. All this indicates the ways a folk form can be transformed, new content, music, staging. They bring it into the present, give it new audiences, and become deeply part of Philippine art and life. I am honored to introduce Mr. Sulaiman Hamisolamin and Ms. Hara K. Castillo to the stage. Sulaiman Hamisolamin earned a Bachelor of Music degree majoring in classical guitar from the University of the Philippines College of Music. He also completed his Master of Music in classical guitar performance at Illinois State University. He founded the Guitar Guild, an ensemble for guitar minors, concentrations, extensions, and enthusiasts. Currently, he is chair of the Strings and Chamber Music Department at the UP College of Music. Ms. Hara K. D. Castillo is a soprano currently enrolled in the Bachelor of Music program, majoring in voice performance at the University of the Philippines. In 2017, she was awarded 7 medals at the World Championships of Performing Arts. She has performed at esteemed stages such as the Metropolitan Theater, Samsung Theater, the Luz Auditorium in Dumaguete, and the Aliw Theater. So ladies and gentlemen, here are Sulaiman Hamisolamin and Hara K. Castillo with a rendition of Nabasag ang Banga from the classic zarzuela, Dalagang Bukid.
Dalagang Bukid was written by Hermogenes E. Ilagan with music composed by Leon Ignacio. The original zarzuela premiered at Teatro Zorilla in 1917 and narrates the love story of Angelita and Cipriano. Two lovers from a rural village, Angelita's parents disapproved of Cipriano as her suitor because they favored Don Silvestre instead. When they forced Angelita to marry Don Silvestre, she revealed she had already secretly married Cipriano, who is actually a lawyer. In the end, Don Silvestre, being a gentleman, congratulated the couple. May isang dalagang nasa lok ng tubig, kinis ng ganda niya'y hubog sa nilalig. Ano at pagdakay bigla nang lumapit, ang isang binatang makisig. Wika ng dalagay, huwag kang magalaw. Tugon ng lalaki, ako'y kaawaan. Sagot ng babae, huwag ka ng buwisit. Samo ng binata, ako'y umibig. Ano ang nangyari? Nabasag ang banga. Pagkat ang lalaki ay napadubilas, kaya't ang babae naroon umiiyak, at ang sinasabi ay siya'y napahamak. Ang kinasapitan pagdating ng bahay, ano tumiiyak, tanong ng magulang. Tugon ng babae, mangyari po ina. Ako ay tinakot ng isang aswang, at nang sabihin ko huwag ka magalaw, agad inagaw ang pangakong tangan. Kaya po tumuwing walang dalang tubig, at pati na ba
ladies and gentlemen, again, Mr. Sulaiman Hami Solomin and Miss Hara K. Castillo. So thank you very much. Your Zarzuela performance is a beautiful conclusion to our program. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, to officially close, I would like to invite Jonathan Chua, the former Dean of the School of Humanities and the current OIC of the Modern Languages Department, to the stage for a few remarks.
Good evening, everybody. There's little more to add after the three grand ladies listening to them. As a way of closing the book launching, I thought it would make sense to recall a few book-related moments I've had with Dr. Fernandez. She loved books, obviously. She had a sizable library in her house, which Neni Santo Romana used, I guess, as a base when she was finishing her thesis on the short stories of Casiano Calalang. Where is she? There. Okay. The library had books both antique and new, and after her death, it was donated to the DLSU library. Among the volumes was an almost complete set of the Cultural Research Bulletin. That was the publication of the Cultural Research Association of the Philippines, or CRAP, but she said, okay, but she calls it CRP, okay? She's a Cultural Research Association of the Philippines. Dr. Fernandez is one of the founding members, along with Bienvenido Lumbera, Nicanor Chongson, Soledad Reyes. One can argue that Philippine studies, as we know it now, emerged from the activities of this group because it sought to understand Philippine culture on its own terms. It was as part of that group that Dr. Fernandez entered into theater research, resulting in her dissertation at the Ateneo de Manila and later her book, The Iloilo Zarzuela. One can even argue that her food research was also rooted in her experience with CRP. Now, I mentioned that her library was donated to the De La Salle University, but the library did not get several titles. In the 1990s, Dr. Fernandez was already giving away her books, and my friend Danny Reyes and I were beneficiaries of her largesse. And among the books she gave me were Richard Altick's The Art of Literary Research and Chauncey Sanders' An Introduction to Research in English Literary History, both of which I used in teaching. But the most valuable for me were Volume 2, 1949, and Poems 55, the very first Peso book, 1962, both authored by Jose Garcia Villa. Now, I had the first signed by Mr. Villa through the kindness of Luis Cabalquinto when I had the chance to go to the United States. Dr. Fernandez had given me Villa's phone number, and when I introduced myself as a student of Dr. Fernandez, he said, "Isn't she married to a fat man?" A fat man, twice, huh? And when I told Dr. Fernandez the story, she said that her husband really was indeed a fat man. And I remain grateful for her gift of books. In 2000, the year 2000, I had the chance to make her a book. The writer Danton Remoto was then the head of the university's Office of Research and Publications. And he thought it was time for a festschrift for Doreen. And he asked me to do, nobody else siguro, no? So he asked me to do it. I remember asking potential contributors to keep it a secret, but how could they, or I had to fix her life chronology with her, so she had to act surprised, at the book launching. Feasts and Feats, a festschrift for Doreen G. Fernandez, was the very first book I edited. It was a pleasant introduction to the business because she was the subject. So she loved books, but she also wrote books, or wrote 4 books. That I had the privilege of witnessing as well. At certain near-desperate moments in the making of the CCP Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, back in 1994, she came to our rescue. Editor-in-Chief Nicanor Chongson was at his wit's end, scouting for writers who could meet deadlines and style requirements. Many of them had backed out. Others were out of town or had other commitments. If we needed anything, she told us, Dr. Fernandez, anything at all related to Philippine writing in English or Philippine theater, she would write it. And write she did. Promptly at 8 a.m. every morning, she turned in articles on hard copy and on 5x5 floppy disks. You remember those? 5x5. On, for example, the works of Resil Mojares, Leopoldo Yabes, Nick Joaquin, Alfredo Navarro Salanga, and so on. They were flawlessly written, and so a joy for me and Dr. Johnson, who did not have to do much editing except to remove a comma or two. She was very fond kasi of using periodic sentences and antithetical phrases, and cataloging, so there were so many commas. She wrote so many entries so quickly that she eventually ran out of floppy disks, and had to ask us to return some of them. As for her own books, her favorite collaborator was Ed Alegre, and her co-writer for the original SARAP, and her favorite publisher was Lori Tan of Bookmark. SARAP, published in 1988, to my knowledge, is her first compilation of food essays. The natural offshoot of writing those books was book launches, like the one we're having now. I was too young for SARAP, but I was there for at least 2 launches, Fruits of the Philippines at Cafe Isabel, and Palayok at the Villa Mare in Makati. The latter, it turned out, was going to be her last book launching, but in his remarks that day, Lori Tan had said that he was waiting for her to submit a manuscript on the lechon, which apparently was her next book project for Bookmark. It seems fitting now that her first posthumous book launching is of both SARAP and Palayok, her first and final work in Philippine food. I would like to think that she enjoyed the performances, enjoyed the presentations, and is thankful to Exploding Galaxies for making her work available again. And if she didn't get to write a dissertation on the lechon, there is anyway a brief section about it in Palayok, which is on sale outside. So allow me to end with the last meal I shared with her, which I included, I think, in a eulogy 23 years ago. It was almost invariable, whether the establishment was new or had seen better days, the rites that she observed when you dined with her. Part of the preliminaries after we had ordered the food was the medication. She would take out her syringe and casually give herself a shot of insulin near the belly, where she had pinched a roll of flesh. She would proceed to copy the menu by hand, take pictures of the food and the place, solicit opinions on the food. I was asked to inspect the men's room, pick a morsel or two from our plates, and at the end of it all, pick up the tab. Usually the manager or his lackey would come over to tell us that the meal was on the house, but she would insist on paying. And then we would get something complimentary, like a dessert or an umbrella. At the Chocolate Kiss at UP, I remember that. An umbrella from the Chocolate Kiss. My last lunch with her was at China Bistro in Libis, a few days before she left for the US. Earlier that day, we had visited Francisco Arceliana to get a blurb that he had promised for the critical Villa. Now, she brought him some beef tapa from Singapore, and as he had asked her to do. But no, he said in the voice that she described as oracular. He didn't ask for tapa, not the kind you could eat. He wanted tapa cloth, the type you could hang on the wall. Okay. So, okay. At the China Bistro, we had the usual, siomai, scallops, and all that, But the house specialty was supposed to be xiaolong pao, So that's a dumpling of meat and broth filling. The broth is wrapped while it is frozen, and when you steam it, it melts, and so it's supposed to quiver when you hold it up. So she ate it the way I was told it should be eaten. You pop the whole thing into your mouth, the wrapper, the meat, and the broth, and then you bite, so the flavors will explode in your mouth. Okay. No, she did it, and then she put a hand over her mouth, and when she brought it down, she was smiling. It's not the most glamorous way of eating, and if one wasn't careful, one could burn your tongue or even choke. But what a metaphor it now seems for the way Dr. Doreen Fernandez lived, with courage and with gusto. Thank you very much for coming, and happy birthday, I suppose, Dr. Fernandez. Thank you.
So again, thank you very much, former Dean of the School of Humanities, Jonathan. So again, the books are available outside, so see you in a little bit. And on behalf of Exploding Galaxies, the School of Humanities of the Ateneo de Manila University, the Department of Communication, and the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings, we would like to thank you for joining us in celebrating SARAP and PALAYOK, the Doreen G. Fernandez Legacy. We would also like to thank the Kwan Laurel family whose generosity made this event possible. So, thank you for being here. We'd like to invite you now to the cocktail reception outside at the Salvador Bernal lobby. So, duro-duro gid nga salamat. Good evening to everyone. Happy 91st birthday, Ma'am Doreen Fernandez. Again, we are at the Doreen Black Box Theater, named in her honor. So, thank you very much, everyone. Good evening.